Good morning, Agent Hart.
Morning.
Now, would you prefer I refer to you as agent? You're a retired FBI agent, is that right?
I am retired. That's correct.
Is it your preference to be called chief deputy, or would you prefer agent?
Agent's a little less of a mouthful, so that's fine.
And then I'll take your suggestion and refer to you as agent, if that's okay. As part of your investigation, you went over thousands of messages. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Tens of thousands of messages?
Yes.
Okay. Significant amount.
Correct.
And you put together a summary of what you thought were relevant messages, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about who some of these messages were sent to, who received some of these messages. Obviously, you spoke in great detail about messages from Chad Daybell. Is that right?
Correct.
And Lori Vallow.
Yes.
Melanie Gibb.
No, Melanie Boudreau.
Well, did you ever have any that you reviewed from Melanie Gibb?
There are messages between Lori Vallow and Melanie Gibb in the iCloud that I have reviewed. Yes.
Okay, so there were messages that were involved with Melanie Gibb as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did any of these folks use other names in speaking with themselves, referring to others?
Can you clarify? Do you mean that
So,
names other than
nicknames.
themselves?
Nicknames. Lori Vallow use any nicknames?
Yes.
What nicknames did Lori Vallow use?
For others or for herself?
For herself and when others responded to her.
She would be called Lolo. She would be called Lily. Chad Daybell referred to her as Elena. And then there were numerous nicknames for her contacts that she had within the iCloud.
Okay, and then as far as Melanie Gibb, do you recall the nickname that Melanie Gibb used?
For herself?
For herself, yes.
I'm sorry, I don't recall that.
Okay. If I mention the word Phoebe, does that ring a bell?
Phoebe rings a bell, but I couldn't say definitively that that's associated with Melanie Gibb.
Okay. And if I were to show you a text message that referenced Phoebe to Lori Vallow, would that refresh your recollection?
It may.
Okay. We'll get to that in a minute. Other nicknames, other people, Alex Cox, did he have any nicknames?
Al was the most common one.
Okay. Melanie Boudreau?
Mostly Mel.
Okay. Anybody else you can think of?
Lori Vallow referred to Chad Daybell frequently as Bubby, Bubby.
Okay. Anything else?
Not that I would classify as nicknames. There were several occasions where others were assigned names by Chad Daybell, but I
Okay.
wouldn't call those nicknames.
Okay. Now, if I could have Elmo put up, Madam Clerk.
What are we going to put on the Elmo?
Judge, I'm going to ask the officer to go back to
Referencing 183.
183, Judge.
183 has been admitted, so, and Mr. Pryor's mentioned before, there's a light and zoom feature on that Elmo for clarity. And there's a light there as well somewhere. There's a light switch that gets rid of the shadow. There you go. Thank you.
Wouldn't make it without any help, Judge, I promise you. So I want to start towards the end of what we talked about. And you talked about your analysis of this particular discussion or chain of text messages. And this is from the Lolly time at iCloud, Lori Vallow, right?
Correct.
And the last line, I want you to read 824 again for me.
Of course. I want to be with you. That is my greatest hope and dream. I would happily join you tomorrow if it felt like heaven would not strike us down.
And you interpreted this in what way?
I don't believe I interpreted it at all during my testimony. I read it into the record on direct.
Okay. Well, I'm a bit curious. I want to be with you. That's Chad responding that he wants to be with Lori Vallow, right?
Correct.
It's my greatest hope and dream. He wants to have a relationship with her, right?
Yes, I mean, they've been in a 10-month relationship at this point, but I think he
Okay.
wants that relationship to be overtly known to everyone.
Okay. And you said a 10-month relationship. So 8/11 of 2019. I go back 10 months and that puts me right to October 31st, give or take a few days. So is it your testimony? You said 10 months. Is it your testimony that that relationship started immediately on October 31st, the first time they met?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. So they were in a physical relationship from the first time they met?
No, I testified that their physical relationship began the second time they met in person, which would have been November 15th through the 17th of 2018.
And your interpretation of what that physical relationship in 2 weeks later was what? What type of physical relationship they have 2 weeks later?
Chad Daybell wrote about it in great detail. They were kissing, fondling each other, in bed with each other, taking each other's clothes off.
Okay. And that, are you referring to the Jack and the Elena story? Is that what you're referring to?
James and
James and
Elena.
Elena, I'm sorry, I
Yes.
said Jack. James and Elena, excuse me. You're talking about the James and Elena story, right?
Correct.
And you know what Chad Daybell does for a living, right?
I do.
He's an author.
Yes.
He writes books about experiences that people have, whether religious or otherwise, right?
Yes.
And with every author, there's a little bit of exaggeration or um, artistic creativity whenever you're writing books. Would you agree with me?
If it's nonfiction, I would agree with you.
Okay. And you also know that this James and Elena was really a book in the making by Chad Daybell about his relationship with Lori Vallow, right?
I wasn't aware that it's a book in the making. No.
Okay. So this was just him taking doing a literary exercise, just writing about his relationship with Lori Vallow, not for the purpose of doing anything with it, just writing about this and making notes using different names, right?
I believe it's a truthful and accurate story.
Okay. Okay. A truthful and accurate story that you're putting down in writing about a relationship you're having with a woman, right?
Yes,
With some artistic creativity applied to it, correct?
I'll agree.
Okay. Now, did you, as part of your investigation, go back and look at some of Chad Daybell's writings?
We had someone in the investigative group do that. I've had some limited exposure to Chad Daybell's other writings, but I was not the individual who did an extensive analysis of those.
Okay. Are you aware that Chad Daybell made a habit of at least vaguely touching on some of his personal experiences when he wrote books?
It's my understanding that a couple of his books were about his prior experiences in his
Right.
life.
And one of his books was about his daughter Emma. In fact, the very book mentions the name Emma in the book, doesn't it not?
I couldn't tell you the title of the book, but I believe that's correct.
So it wouldn't have been particularly unusual for him, given his past about writing about his past experiences, to put together a book or a novel about a relationship he was having with Lori Vallow, correct?
Correct. I think the James and Elena story is about his relationship with Lori Vallow.
And it wouldn't be unusual, like in his other books, to maybe provide some artistic creativity as far as the facts are concerned, right?
It would depend on which facts you're talking about.
So what you're saying to me is that if the facts are helpful to the prosecuting attorney, he's not making it up.
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative. Move to strike.
Sustained.
You don't know which facts are creative in this story that he was writing Lori Vallow, do you?
I know that we were able to vet and verify an extensive number of facts from that story.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you whether the explicit sexual detail is accurate or not, but the
Okay.
other elements are accurate.
Okay. So when we go back to this lolly time that's up on the board here and showing us, the last line is, I would happily join you tomorrow if it felt like heaven would not strike us down. You see that line?
I do.
Okay. And you said you didn't offer any explanation as to what that meant.
On direct, I did not.
Okay. And that was on August 11th of 2019.
That's correct.
And it talks about heaven would strike us down
It
in
does.
regards to the relationship.
Say again.
Well, it's in regards to the relationship because I will happily join you tomorrow if it felt like heaven would not strike us down. That's what that says, isn't it?
It does.
Okay, so that has nothing to do with murder, does it?
I don't know that I could say entirely that it doesn't.
Okay. Does it have anything to do with the fact that maybe Mr. Daybell felt he couldn't divorce his wife Tammy?
I don't know whether that's what that's in reference to or not.
Could it have anything to do with the possibility that Chad Daybell, as this so-called visionary who gets these premonitions, wouldn't leave his wife Tammy until his premonition came true that she would pass away?
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the evidence or the prior testimony.
Overruled.
You can answer that, officer.
Again, I don't know what was in Chad Daybell's mind as it relates to why heaven would strike him down if he joined Lori Vallow at that point.
Tens of thousands of text messages, right?
Yes,
I didn't see in any of these, and if you have them in the other 10,000 that you went through, show me the one that says, hey, this is Chad. Let's kill the kids.
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative and tries to put evidence not in fact.
Overruled.
Facts not in evidence.
Well, it's question on cross. It's overruled.
Show me the text. It says, let's kill the kids.
Well, that is argument, Mr. Pryor. If you want to ask if there's a text, that would be different.
Is there a text that says, let's kill the kids?
there are several texts that talk in detail about the deaths of those two children. Yes.
Oh, well, in detail about the deaths and what happened during their deaths, right? Not let's kill the kids, are there?
Wait a minute. What do you mean what happened during their?
What I'm saying is that there's references to Tylee and JJ throughout text messages, correct?
Yes,
Okay. But there is not a text message that says, let's kill the kids, is there?
there are text message in those specific words. No, but certainly alluding to and planning for the deaths of Tylee and JJ. Yes.
Okay. And what in reference to how they're planning to kill the kids, why don't you talk to me a little bit about that? What exactly did you come across that says, let's plan on killing the kids?
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the testimony. It's argumentative.
That is sustained.
You just made reference to the fact that there are text messages that talk about the planning of killing these kids, right?
Correct.
What text messages are you referring to?
There are several text messages between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell that refer to a plan to take the children and Chad Daybell's ability as a supposed visionary to understand when that might happen.
Okay. Okay. So there's no specific text message that talks about we're going to kill the kids and live happily ever after, is there?
I would disagree. Contextually, I think that's the meaning of those texts.
Okay. So in other words, you're interpreting those texts how you think they should be understood, right?
Well, those texts talk about the deaths, using the word death of Tylee and JJ. It talks about their death percentage, and both Tylee and JJ ended up being murdered. So if that's context, then that's the conclusion I draw, yes.
Okay, so what you're referring to are the text message where a numeric number was assigned to particular children about death percentages, correct?
Assigned by Chad Daybell, yes.
Right. Now, we talked a little earlier, and that's why I'm leading into this with you. And you could probably help me a little bit. My recollection is you were talking something about Allie Bloomer, right?
Yes, that's the second slide.
Okay. Well, it's actually the third slide, isn't it?
Oh.
Can you go to the third one? You threw me off, right?
It starts on the second slide and then it continues to the third slide.
So you talked about the fact that because Chad Daybell put a numeric number on the children, that was the reason they were killed, right?
No, I wouldn't state it that way, that was the reason they were killed.
Okay. That supported your theory that they were killed because they were put a dark number on them, right?
I believe the dark number provided the justification for
Okay.
them to carry out those acts.
Okay. Okay, so when we go down to line 3000, would you read that one for me, the first two sentences?
Yes. Allie Bloomer is 4.1 dark. Her cop husband is 3 dark.
Okay. Now, to your knowledge, are Allie Bloomer and her husband dead?
To my knowledge, they are not.
Okay. So when you assign a number dark, explain this. I mean, you probably know better than I do. Is this something that's part of the LDS faith?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Is there a reference in the LDS faith to light and dark?
Light and dark. Yes, there's reference throughout the Bible and the LDS faith to light and dark.
So if there was previous testimony by someone who suggested that light and dark is not part of the LDS faith, they're either mistaken or they're not being truthful. Would that be fair?
I don't think light and dark as assigned by Chad Daybell is part of the LDS faith.
That's not what I asked you, sir, and I appreciate you answering that way. What I asked you is that there is light and dark in the LDS faith, right?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Overruled.
It's overruled. There's a light and dark in the LDS faith, right?
Yes,
Okay, so what we're talking about is that there's a numeric system here. Is that what you're telling me? That Mr. Daybell's using?
there is a numeric system that Mr. Daybell is using.
Okay, and you've never seen this with anybody else ever putting a numeric system on light and dark, correct?
I have not.
Okay. Okay. And Allie Bloomer and her cop husband are not dead, right? To your knowledge?
To my knowledge, they are not.
So do you know how this dark numbering system works? Is high good or is low good, or how does that work on the dark spectrum?
From what I've been able to decipher based on my participation in the investigation, the higher the number, the worse it is.
Okay. So if you're a 1 dark, that you're better off being a 1 dark than you are being a 4 dark, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Judge, could I have exhibits 6 and 7?
Yes, I'll have the bailiff bring those over.
And if you could just bear with me. While I'm waiting this to warm up a little bit, we'll move on and talk about a couple of other topics it talked about manipulation, right? From both Chad and Lori.
Yes.
Now,
Mr. Pryor, just on the exhibit you've got continually being published there, if you're done with that, would you remove it from being published?
now your testimony is that you felt that Chad was using his religious knowledge or beliefs to manipulate Lori Vallow, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So he was suggesting that because he has so much insight that he's with these religious insights that he's able to convince Lori Vallow to stay with him because he has religious insight. Is that correct?
He was looked to as the visionary for this small group. And in that capacity, yes, use that to keep Lori Vallow in a relationship with him.
And the small group you're talking about, who did you discover was in this small group?
The inner circle is really a trio of Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow, and Alex Cox.
Anybody else?
That's what I would refer to as the inner circle. There were others that were more peripheral.
And when you say more peripheral, shared some of the same religious views that Chad Daybell has.
Yes, I would describe them as adherents to Chad Daybell's doctrines.
How many of those do you talk about that are peripheral people that were adhering to it?
6 to 10.
Would Melanie Gibb be included in that group?
Yes,
David Warwick?
yes,
Zaluma Pastenes?
yes,
Melanie Boudreau?
yes.
So this wasn't a large group of people then.
No, Chad Daybell spoke at a lot of conferences and those were larger, but I don't, I can't speak to how his message was received by those people.
And when you say Chad Daybell spoke at these conferences, you touched on it a little before that maybe Lori Vallow wasn't believing everything that Chad was saying about this religious stuff, right?
No, I don't believe I said that. I do believe she believed pretty
Okay.
much everything that Chad Daybell said.
Okay. And maybe what you testified to is that you questioned the accuracy of it in one of the text messages that you put up on the board. Do you recall saying something about that? No?
I don't, if you can direct me to this particular message.
So Chad Daybell started writing these books well before she ever met Lori Vallow. He met Lori Vallow, correct?
Yes,
And he wrote these books about his experiences and about his theories and interpretation of what he felt was the teachings of the LDS faith, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Introduces facts, not in evidence. I believe counsel's testifying.
Sustained.
Well, he wrote a lot of books about religious issues, correct?
yes, I think most of his books had to do with kind of an end of times theme.
And he would go on these go to various places and speak about his books and try to sell books.
Correct.
This was sort of a way to market or to make a living by talking about various religious feelings about religion, and then he'd go on and speak to people, and then in the meantime try to make a living or try to make money selling these books to people, right?
Yes,
And the predominant audience that he would go to, these encampments, these gatherings, these various locales, for the most part, they were centered around Utah, correct?
no, I mostly, well, St. George, Mesa, there was one in Boise.
Right.
So
Well-
the Intermountain West.
And you beat me to the punch because I was about to start with Utah, then say Arizona, then say Idaho. But the predominant audience that these books were marketing to were people in Utah, Arizona, Idaho, correct?
That's where he spoke. Yes,
And they were predominantly marketed to people of the LDS faith, right?
I think so.
And they were marketed to the people who would want to go to these various seminars about preparing for the end of time, right?
Yes,
And these people weren't all members of a cult, were they?
not to my knowledge.
And there were various audiences who would show up and listen to Chad Daybell talk and sell his books, right?
Yes,
So the fact that he has Lori Vallow, Alex Cox, Melanie Gibb, and David Warwick, who were friends of his, right?
well, I think the relationship with Alex Cox and Lori Vallow was closer than what, it was different than those other names that you mentioned and closer than friendship.
Right. But let's take, and we'll talk a little bit about the Alex Cox, Lori Vallow relationship, but let's, as far as the other were concerned, all of the emails and all of the text messages, that you talked about, they had a recurring theme. These people were friends, right?
Yes,
And these friends talked about religious beliefs, correct?
yes,
And these religious beliefs may not be what everybody else believes in, but they seem to have a consistent um, theme, and they were all consistent in believing whatever Lori, Chad, David, and Melanie were talking about. Would that be fair?
I think that's fair.
Okay. So when you talk about a group, we're really talking about a group of friends who have some maybe not traditional beliefs, but have religious beliefs, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Now, the text I put up there from Lori to Chad, and it's the one line 836. Oh, wait. Let me know when you all set?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you take that as being would you take that as being in somewhat of a sarcastic tone?
no, I think Lori was pushing Chad and was serious.
Okay. So you should give all of your love and your attention to your wife and family. That's what she's saying, right?
Yes,
I'm just a distraction. Go have fun with your family. There's nothing sarcastic about that?
well, if you look at Chad Daybell's reaction, which is that is so crushing and I feel so destroyed inside, I don't think he took it as being sarcastic.
Okay. I really do want you to. I just can't be in the way anymore. If things change, then we can talk, but we have nothing until things change. So she's basically drawing a line in the sand and saying, unless something changes, we have nothing to do with each other. Would that be fair?
Yes,
Okay. So what she's doing is she's saying that unless something happens, either you divorce your wife or you kill your wife or your wife dies, you don't have me.
I agree.
Okay. And then Chad responds, I'm constantly begging for change below. You see that?
I do.
But I'm hindering your life and you deserve better. I love you so intensely. Okay. You see that?
I do.
The text following that, did any of them say, all right, I agree with you, Lori. Let's kill Tammy. You find any of those?
I found a number of texts talking about Tammy's death percentage in subsequent conversations.
Yeah. You're also aware that that Chad Daybell, maybe you're not, but are you aware that since 2016, Chad Daybell had been talking to these public audiences about the fact that Tammy was going to have a very short life?
I was aware that he made those statements to particular individuals. I'm not aware that he spoke of that publicly, but yes, I know that he communicated that Tammy was going to die to a number of people.
Right. And these other individuals are friends and family of Chad Daybell, who are also friends and family of Tammy Daybell, correct?
That I don't know. I can tell you the ones that I do know that he spoke with
Okay.
and I'm not aware that they knew Tammy.
Okay. Okay. So it wasn't necessarily a secret that Chad was keeping with anybody since 2016, that he felt he had a premonition or a belief that his wife was going to have a short life, right?
There were certain people he communicated that to, correct?
Right. And when I'm reading through the text messages and you went through your presentation, am I wrong when I'm reading these messages to read into this that Chad was waiting for Tammy to pass away, and that was what the delay was, correct?
It could be that, or it could be waiting to take action.
Okay. So we don't know what it was, right?
From the investigation, I believe I know what it was.
Okay, well, people differ in their opinions, right?
They do.
And Judge, could we approach for just a minute?
Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's a thumb drive with a file in it. It may be a thumb drive that's having few issues because it wanted to pull files and then it didn't. So we'll see if it will.
And it's here. Judge, I got it.
Okay, all right. thank you.
Surprise. Magical words, you did it. And Judge, I'm going to try to publish off of Exhibit 7 an email from, I believe it was from the Lolly Time, previously admitted exhibit number 7.
All right, once you have that pulled up on your screen, let us know and then I'll,
Judge, I'm ready.
okay, I'll instruct the clerk this time to allow that to be published then.
Okay. Now, you previously mentioned about Phoebe, was your recollection was that it was Melanie Gibb, is that correct?
I testified that I wasn't 100% certain of that, but I don't dispute that that's,
Okay. So at the top, this is a text message from Phoebe from the Lolly Time to Lori Vallow. Would you read the first line?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks. I love you so much. I'm going to teach right now, teaching about discerning and shutting off dark portals.
Okay, and then the one below that.
I could see the darkness so clearing last night when I was teaching last night. Their eyes were dark like marbles.
Okay, now the date of those messages was when?
July 25th of 2019.
Were you aware during your investigation where Melanie Gibb was teaching on that particular occasion?
No, I'm not.
Okay. You are aware that Melanie Gibb taught classes, variety of different things about vibrations and about light and dark, correct?
I wasn't aware that she taught classes. I know there was a podcast and group discussions and things like that.
Right. She would go to encampments or she would go to programs and be a speaker talking about a variety of religious topics, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so when Melanie Gibb talks about dark portals, is that something she's talking about that's consistent with the LDS faith to your knowledge?
not to my knowledge.
Okay. When she's talking about eyes being like dark marbles, is that also something that's consistent with being of the LDS faith?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Okay. And to avoid, and Judge, we can bring that down now. I'm done. But during your research, there were other individuals that talked about putting numeric numbers on people with dark and light, right?
There was one single instance in all of my review where Lori Vallow disputed a designation made by Chad Daybell. So that's the only other time I'm aware of anyone else putting those numbers on
Okay.
individuals.
Okay, and all I want to do is just have you confirm then for me. In the review of all of those 10,000 plus text messages, are you telling me that other than Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, they were the only ones who talked about dark and light and put a numeric number on someone?
I am testifying that the only times I saw those numbers being generated, with the exception of one occasion, were all by Chad Daybell.
Okay, okay. And all of the people that were designated, well, so other than Chad Daybell, your testimony then is that nobody else put numeric numbers on people as it related to dark and light. Is that right?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Sustained.
You brought up a subject about the process of sealing. Remember that in the very beginning of your testimony?
It's part of the James and Elena story, correct?
Right. But you also explained that what sealing is in your definition, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I understood sealing to be part of a marriage process when two couples of the LDS faith go into a temple and they perform a private ceremony. Is that what you understand it to be as well?
Yes, when two people go to get married, correct.
Right, and that is a process in which, and I don't want to go into, we don't need to go into significant detail about this. But it's a religious, symbolism to show that they have an intent of wanting to be together the rest of their life, right?
Correct.
And they're basically sealing themselves to each other in essence, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Has nothing to do with death or anything like that. It has everything to do with the celebration of the marriage ceremony, correct?
It's a marriage ordinance that's performed in LDS temples.
Okay, all right, okay. And Judge, I'm going to stop there. That's all I have at this point, Judge. Thank you.
All right, that will conclude cross-examination of the witness. Redirect from the state.
Agent Hart, you were just asked about the ceiling reference in one of those messages. Do you recall testifying about that before?
I do.
And you were asked specifically about it dealing with the marriage ceremony by Mr. Pryor, correct?
Yes,
And previously, did you testify that there are also sealings done for people that have passed away?
that's correct.
And when you referenced the James and Elena story, was that your understanding of what was being referenced at that time?
Judge, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Was that your understanding of what was being referenced in the James and Elena story?
Yes, the sealings being referred to in the James and Elena story are what they call proxy, meaning that genealogical research is done and that a man and a woman go in and based on historical records, if two people had been married, they then perform that marriage ceremony in their behalf. The two people performing the ceremony aren't getting married. They're a stand-in for people based on genealogical research who are being sealed.
And at the time that was done, that was in the November of 2018.
November 16th of 2018.
And at that time, was Charles Vallow still alive?
No, he was not. Or excuse me, yes, he was. I'm sorry, I was thinking of 2019.
2019. So in November of 2018, Charles Vallow was still alive.
He was.
And in November of 2018, was Tammy Daybell still alive?
She was.
And is part of the idea behind the sealing that you would be married for eternity?
Judge, leading question.
Sustain.
When we looked at those messages, if you recall, was the indication that Chad believed or was indicating he and Lori would be married eternally?
That's precisely what was stated in Chad's writing.
Through your investigation, were you able to determine where the teachings of light and dark originated as far as this particular group of individuals you were asked about?
They originated from Chad Daybell.
And you indicated Melanie Gibb was one of the individuals that would have received those teachings?
I believe so, yes.
You were asked some questions about levels and light and dark, and specifically in reference to Allie Bloomer. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Was Allie Bloomer a telestial relative of Chad or Lori?
not to my knowledge.
And we talked a little bit about that telestial relative, the meaning of that, and Mr. Pryor put that slide back up. You'd referenced that it is the lowest kingdom. Would that also would telestial refer here on earth?
Yes,
So the reference was the telestial relatives were obstacles.
correct.
Through your investigation, did you learn if Charles was ever deemed dark?
Charles Vallow,
Charles Vallow.
he was.
Did you ever learn whether Tylee Ryan was deemed dark?
She was.
Did you ever learn whether JJ Vallow was deemed dark?
He was deemed to have turned into a zombie, which
Judge, unresponsive.
Overruled.
is parallel to being dark, being inhibited by a dark entity.
And what about Tammy Daybell? Did you ever learn whether she was deemed dark?
Again, she was deemed to have been inhibited by a dark entity.
And based on your investigation and looking through these messages, who was the one that would determine if someone was light or dark?
Chad Daybell.
And of those 4 relatives that we talked about, are you aware of their current status?
All 4 are dead.
I have no further questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. I don't think we got outside the scope of cross there or direct, so won't permit recross for this witness. That will conclude the testimony of Agent Hart. Is he going to be recalled potentially by either side?
He is going to be recalled by the state, Your Honor.
And he's going to be called by the defense as well, Judge.
All right, Agent Hart, going forward, then you're still under the court's exclusionary order, which disallows you from watching this trial or discussing your testimony or anybody else's testimony before you return to testify. I'll question you about that when you retake the stand in the future. So please abide by that exclusionary order. And with that, you may go ahead and step down, and thank you for your. Thank you, Judge. You're welcome. Yes, I'll have the bailiff retrieve that exhibit, please.